You're with ETGBS. COVID-19, of course, has upended all aspects of life and has thrown a new set of challenges as well as opportunities for India Inc. The year 2020 will be the one that will be defined really by sustainability, by better risk management, how businesses really have pivoted during these times, or should I say, outmaneuvered uncertainties. Let's talk about that in detail with the eminent panelists that we have. Well, let me begin by speaking with Sangita first up. Sangita, you're in the healthcare sector, really the heart of the crisis, and we did see the hospitals dealing with the COVID load. At the beginning, we did not have enough ventilators, we did not have enough PPE kits. How did there was a fear that was playing out in the minds of the medical fraternity as well. How tough were the initial few days, and what were the challenges that the healthcare industry went through during that time?
So, fantastic question, and I think it's been a tremendous roller coaster ride that all of us have been on. And unprecedented pandemic, all these seem like small words to describe the type of scenario we've been in. But approximately 260 days since COVID has been declared a pandemic by the WHO. And I think Indian hospitals, or the healthcare system at large, I think the response was really multidimensional. And they were governments, there is the public health system, private health system, the police, the social workers, sanitation workers, and corporations and members of society at large. Everyone has been impacted. From a hospital perspective, I would say our own hospital, Apollo, we looked at this as, first we needed to gather information, credible information, and based on the knowledge we had, build an effective strategy. So infectious disease, microbiology, now once we heard of the cytokine storm, we figured out also that we needed to have a multidisciplinary approach to this. So the clinical protocol, the preventive aspect, how do we give public information to keep safe? How do we protect our own staff? What do we do for supply chain? And then how do we use technology and be adaptable in the face of this change? And of course, education and the cycle to continue again and again. None of us thought it would take so long. We all went in thinking 2-3 months, 4-5 months, but this is going on and on. So adaptability, resilience, technology, innovation, and most importantly, I think when the acceptance came and we came away with one thing, forget about, the financial aspect. This is not about making money. History will remember you for whether you did the right thing. And so we at Apollo stepped forward. And I must also say, I think everyone in FICCI, we all stepped forward. Many industries stepped forward to say, let's do the right thing. Let's protect our staff. Let's be credible.
Right.
Let's, maintain business. And we'll talk more. I know you have lots of other panelists, but I'm happy to share elements of the story of the Apollo response to COVID at the appropriate time. So,
right. Let me take that point forward with Saugata. Saugata, you have Sangita here talking about how at Apollo they dealt with the healthcare aspect of it, but you were also involved because the FMCG sector was the sector really behind providing a lot of essential services. There were a lot of supply chains that were broken. We were in the midst of a lockdown. We were in the midst of a lot of panic. What was going on in the minds of you people when you saw what came your way? I'm sure there's nothing that prepared us for the world's strictest lockdown. So what was going on in the mind at that point of time?
So let me just start by saying, actually, we started thinking about having a plan B and a contingency plan sometime the week after Holi. And I still remember sometime mid-March, we had our first so-called task force contingency plan meeting. Till that time, of course, the lockdown hasn't started. But I think one thing we did very well, I thought, was that we first said people safety first and business comes next. And therefore, once you give that assurance to people that we will, and we just not took care of our members, but the entire supply chain, be it the distributors, be it the CNFAs, be it the third party, we ensured that the safety is taken care of first and then business comes. And I think that assurance led each one of them to be heroes. And I think I have seen that each one of them has taken upon themselves. They are empowered. They really were the heroes, and we slowly got supply chain back into. And I think we tried out a lot of experiments. And I keep on telling my team that what you have learned in the last 6 months, you won't have learned in the next 5 years. I think it has been a great learning for all of us. But the philosophy of people's comes first, business comes next. And today we are trying to maximize safety while trying to maximize business. To me, that has actually helped us.
Oh, absolutely. The learning during these times is absolutely unparalleled. Let me get Guenter in on that. Guenter, from a manufacturer's point of view, help us understand what were the key learnings during this COVID period, and how did you prioritize, getting accustomed to the new normal?
The question is, have you already arrived in the new normal, or is the new normal ahead of us? So therefore, what we actually decided, and you mentioned it implicitly, nobody had a blueprint for such kind of crisis, for such kind of black swan event. So we were all confronted with the same challenge. How do we actually get ourselves prepared of what is ahead of us without knowing the order of magnitude of the challenge? So that was one of the reasons why we said, as already mentioned earlier, even before the lockdown, we put a team together, led by our chief risk manager, to set up a business continuity plan. And the key characteristic of the business continuity plan, as of the first discussion with my executive committee, was that we said it needs to be holistic. It needs to cover the entire ecosystem, and it needs to cover the 3 phases as we predicted it to come: the lockdown, the restart, the ramp up. Because we said whatever we do in the first instance, in order to manage the lockdown, we need to be prepared, and we need to do it in the right way that we can actually restart. And this restart, we need to put everything in place in order to ramp up fast if the situation would allow, and if the opportunity would be provided. And I must admit, it was not an easy one to actually think holistically, and at the same point of time, also to take all the ecosystem partners on board. That means dealing at the same point of time in order to prevent a break of the supply chain, as we have highlighted it already, to work with the suppliers as well as with the dealers, because we were right in the midst of the transition, as you might know, as far as the new emission norms are concerned, called stage 4 to bar at stage 6. So the worst point of time where our industry could have been hit by such kind of crisis, and at the end of a prolonged economical downturn, which has very badly hit the industry. So therefore, when with the BCP, we tried to put everything in place, our own blueprint with all the ecosystem partners, in order to, and it followed an approach where we said we rethink, we redesign, we re-engineer, we put, as already mentioned, safety, health, and well-being at the forefront of the decision-making. So almost the sequence as highlighted, people first, business second, but at the same point of time, since we will all live and will survive with the business, business always had an important element in the discussion. And you most probably anyway going to ask the question, so allow me one comment. The lockdown effectively granted us an opportunity to significantly accelerate the adoption of digital, to design new ways of working, standing with our ecosystem partners, and different ways of servicing our customers. So therefore, it was also rich in opportunities. The question is, how can we actually build on these opportunities granted, our flexible and agile response to these opportunities, to actually convert it in a period of sustainable growth.
I will be talking about, how do you build on these opportunities on the road to recovery in just a while from now. But let me also get in Mr. Duggal in on this point. How has COVID-19 pandemic hit the commodity industry at large? What's been your experience, and do you believe now there's a greater focus on sustainability, given the fact that there is, of course, going to be this economic impact that is going to last for a while, sir?
No, I think, as Sangita said, that we have gone through a roller coaster ride and we have been facing a bumpy road. So in the beginning, you build up the new SOPs, and communication was the key in our operations. You see, because there is a fear, there is apprehension, somebody stigma attached. If you have one case 100 kilometers away from your place, people will say that everybody is going to die within 100 kilometers, as if this is going to spread like anything. So new SOPs, of course, were there, but the more importantly, the communication that you are safe, and you have to be patient. You have to communicate people that we are there with you. You have to tell community we are there with you. But still, there will be apprehension attached, and the people will tell in the villages that if you go to the operations of this plant or the mine, you are not going to come back. We will not allow you because you will bring corona from there. So the people had a lot of apprehension. So,
absolutely.
So the people number of people who were reporting to an operation were maybe meager 20% in the beginning and 30% as we went by. But still, you see, the surprising part is that we could maintain our operation to the extent of 80% to 90% of the utilization of the production capacity, even with the 20-30% of the manpower we had. We never thought in our life that is it possible. So we evolved over time, and then some of the technology which was underutilized, we stepped up our effort and started utilizing those technology part, and people became more receptive, more they wanted to train themselves, they wanted to change themselves. So over this, the life has changed a lot. And then we were apprehensive, how shall we be able to protect our margin? We reinvented, redevised, developed the new templates where we evaluated that what are the cost parameters, how we can protect the revenue, whether we are going to stand in the market or not. So there is a lot of evolution which has happened, and over the time, I think we have become much more smarter and much more, sustainable. There is a lot which we have learned on sustainability, safety, how to take care of people, empathy. Everywhere we have learned. And today, if you ask me, we are better prepared for future than we were.
Let me take that point forward with Piyush. Piyush, are we better prepared to deal with any kind of an eventuality, given the fact that we're living in the world of uncertainties, and we never thought that we will leverage technology the way we've done. Look at what's happening in the education sector. We're all sitting at home using our laptops to study. Look at what's happening with media and many more other professions as well. We're all holed up in our homes, but betting big on technology, which is why we're speaking with each of you virtually as well. How did you see the transition really happening during these times?
Well, are we better prepared? I would be a very brave man to sort of say better preparedness ever again, right? Considering what we've been. But certainly, we've all learned a lot. You've heard, I think it's amazing, right? How everybody has spoken about the word resilience and reinvention, right? And you add on to that another, if I was going to do the R thing, relevance of your customer. Because what everybody is still talking about is a massive social, economic change that our entire customer base is going through, where the customer preferences have either been forced to change or are now going to evolve at a pace that is faster than we had ever predicted. Now, of course, a lot of that is all digital, and that is underpinned by technology. So, we will have to invest our way out of this in terms of as we come out at the other end, because what we can't do is deal with it through stealth. What people have done, and this is again being re-emphasized by everybody, is that the workforces have come together and shown a whole lot of stealth and resilience during this period, right? People who did not know how to use technology have done so with a level of stealth and gone ahead. But now we have to reinvent ourselves by, giving them the right tools, the new ways of working, through digitizations of supply chains, to, make our cost base more flexible. Now that is going to require some long-term reprioritization of investments, to accelerating digital. So I do think that's a longer-term journey. We are all going to be on, and we'll have to also be very nimble. I mean, Guenter
absolutely.
About the fact that in the part of when he mentioned the word reinvent, he spoke about resilience and nimble. I would add to that, because we have to be very resilient because we've got safety at stake, health at stake, but we'll have to be very nimble because, as he said, is this the new normal? Nobody knows what the normal is or going to be in the next few weeks. Yeah?
Oh, absolutely. The idea is to be more nimble-footed, and that is how the business is going to evolve as well. Sangita, if I can come to you, while we're talking about the businesses evolving, we also have to look at what the government has done. While there has been a 20 lakh crore rupee package that has been announced by the government, a big push towards Outmanoeuvring Bharat push, a lot of steps being taken by the RBI, the central bank as well, to ensure that there is more liquidity in the system. Yet we're seeing that the banks are a little more cautious when it comes to lending. Besides that, the government's own package, there's very little fiscal spending that has been done. And besides that, we still don't know whether the government, government's own pockets are, they're keeping the purse strings tight. They don't have even a lot of funds to even give out to states during this time. So then what is the path to recovery is going to look like?
So this is a very significant question considering the scenario we're in. And the fact is that if you look at it, this was a long and difficult lockdown. And when you bring the economy into almost like a medically induced coma, there is going to be a contraction of GDP. You saw those contraction of GDP numbers. I believe that we need to acknowledge the fact that the government is carefully maneuvering between the FRBM, the fiscal deficit. They're playing a very careful role between interest rates and inflation and growth, and trying to manage. One good signal, I think, is that they have still kept some powder dry. Because if you look at the direct money transfer into Jan Dhan accounts, I think the very significant thing of ensuring that food grain, so that nobody dies of hunger during this period. So some of those, and then the tremendous ramp up of the medical capability, whether it was public or private, the supply chains, the fact that, we used to produce 10,000 PPEs per day, and the country is now producing 4.5 lakh PPEs per day. So these kind of transformational steps have happened. Some macroeconomic reforms, whether it's, the opening up of the defense, the fact that, yes, there has been an emergency line of credit and the entire MSME sector has been focused and looked at. I think that what we need to do now significantly is ramp up or give the demand stimulus, because the fact that everybody is seeing on the ground that manufacturing factories, we did a FICCI through our survey, factories are saying, yes, we've gone up to about 60-70% production, credit lines are better, little bit of export orders coming back into play. But the consumer sentiment is still extremely limited, and without consumer sentiment, you will not have the economy coming back. I want to quickly make two more points. The big one, I think, is the fact that we've also lost 20 million jobs. And I think that aspect and the fear of the unknown, the fear of the uncertain. So the government needs to literally pump prime the economy with some more spending. So besides the potential of, we are looking at urban Manrega type schemes, more direct cash transfers if possible, especially with the festival season around the corner. We've also given as FICCI a recommendation to say, why don't you do consumption vouchers? So if there's a significant discount, 30 to 50% discount coupons, which are backed by the government spending. This, I think, would be one more methodology where you could ramp up. And at the same time, while you're pushing for the economy, there's normalcy, so that there should be no sporadic lockdowns, etc., because it's well proven now that a weekend lockdown is not going to take away the coronavirus. It only impacts retail sales. So ensure that the lifting of the lockdown is perfect, reverse isolate the vulnerable, continue to protect the healthcare system, ensure that the economy in all fronts, aviation, flights, everything come back. Ensure that the committed schemes on the debt, the emergency lending to MSME, enhance that, the restructuring packages, and then do a demand stimulation boost. And my last point is that continue the move towards macroeconomic reforms, because the opportunity is definitely upon us. And finally, I think the economy, like medicine, the sooner the better. So whatever is going to be done, let's do it quickly, because otherwise it's going to take longer to recover.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, the festive season is just around the corner. And for the FMCG sector, for the auto sector, this time is going to be very, very important. Saugata, if I can get you in on that. Sangita made a very relevant point and a very important point on the fact is that we need to get demand back. We need to get people back to the markets. And while initially we did see there was a lot of rural growth, and that was what was driving the sales up, because urban centers were locked down, rural not that much. But when do you see things getting back to normal, and how important will be the focus on demand, the fact that the government has to revive demand?
So you're absolutely right. I think as far as rural is concerned, I think a combination of good monsoons, some of the direct benefit transfers, some migration, and some of the food grains that has been given, I think demand has been relatively stable. And compared to the last few years where rural was sluggish, I think we are seeing a reasonably stable demand, especially if you see in two-wheelers, tractors, some of the essential FMCG products. Urban, I think there is a problem. I think it's a combination of 2-3 things. One has been, of course, the spread of COVID. There's anxiety to go out. People are only doing essentials. Secondly, the job losses, I think, and the migration. So the total demand has shrunk in the urban case. And I believe that unless there is a stimulus and also a feeling of less anxiety, because I think today what is happening is, I'll just give you some basic shopper insight. Even if people are visiting a mall or a modern trade outlet, today they're in a hurry to just go out, and it's a limited basket shopping because there is an anxiety and a fear. So it's a combination of a feel good, which will happen because of less, job insecurity or some money into the pocket, but also I think the cases of COVID has to also simultaneously go down a bit, because that anxiety also drives certain behavior. I believe that things are normalizing a bit. It will take some time, but I would think that...
How much time?
Very good.
Depends on sector to sector. Obviously, it will take into something which is discretionary retail, anything which is a little more luxury, it will definitely...
What about for the FMCG sector, Saugata?
I think FMCG sector, if you take out the discretionary, we are more or less getting back on track. I think the question is...
About 90%?
Yeah, we should be. I think most of the categories are reasonably back on track. But I think the question is how far you sustain it, because it is getting back on track means getting back into pre-COVID, which itself the sector was going down. So I think if you look at the kind of growth, to get into growth, I would say you have to look at something like an April-June, significant growth, April-June going forward next year.
Right. Let me get Guenter in on that. Guenter, the fact is that we need to revive demand. Your industry, from the likes of Kirloskar to Maruti Suzuki, all have been making, and I've been talking about that there is a need to rejig the taxation structure for the auto sector. Is that what is keeping the buyers out? The fact that the taxes that we have here in India on automobiles is very high, anywhere from the range of 28% to 50%?
Look, if we rewind in time 2 years, fiscal year 18-19, for the automotive industry, the so-called record year, where our dreams started to grow into the sky, and when we thought that there's effectively no limit. We learned about the limits shortly after, in passenger as well as in commercial vehicles. The taxation before and the taxation after was the same, but we all of a sudden faced a period of subdued demand, a period of conscious sentiments, and we actually saw an overlay of, call it economical and structural changes. Structural changes as far as customer behavior was concerned. where we saw actually a movement from the ownership model to the shared mobility concept. And this combined with the overall economic decrease or downturn, if you would like to say so, was a difficult period of time. I just would like to use one reference, and then we can talk about the importance of a stimulus or the importance of putting emphasis on demand. If all the independent institutes, as well as our own representative body as it is SIAM, will be right, then the volume this year of newly registered vehicles is most probably going to get to the level of the fiscal year 2010-2011. Some would say we have already congested roads. We have lots of traffic issues, parking concerns, etc., pollution concerns. What's wrong with it? Wrong with it is that this industry stands for 8% of the GDP and for 49% of the manufacturing GDP, and actually stands for 50 million jobs provided in India. And we were on a growing trend and expected to become the third largest market globally. And with the third largest market also expecting that we would become an automotive hub, which puts on top to the local Indian demand, leveraging the opportunities provided in India for the world, also additional volumes for export. Right. And if you take this for a minute and you call the automotive industry an economical engine, you need to think twice how you actually treat the engine. If you actually let it run slow with all of the primary and secondary impacts, or if you actually think twice of what needs to be done in order to put a stimulus. Does it need to be a complete revamp of the taxation scheme?
Can a GST rate cut rev up this engine?
The point is, you have listed a number of manufacturers, but we fortunately did not make any reference to Tata Motors because I was not on the forefront actually demanding it. While I'm at the same point of time belong to the ones who are saying focus needs to be on demand, because demand, as it is retail, is going to drive production and wholesale. And I think this is the balance we need to find, because the current incentive that sits on market share based on wholesale is actually going to set the wrong direction for an industry. So we need to make sure that what we provide to the customer actually meets their expectations. And you take the last 2 months, what has effectively helped the automotive industry and passenger vehicles to revive, to restart and to revive fast? It was our ability to deliver the right products. There was a new set of products available with BS6, but also some product upgrades, a couple of new launches. And at the same point of time, we actually came with financing schemes, which were not available pre-COVID. Now all of a sudden, individual mobility ownership becomes affordable, while it was somewhat difficult in the past. Because one thing is independent of GST and other taxation, as it is, etc. We have also seen an increase of the fuel price, then the new regime as far as road taxes are concerned, then the insurance policy with the 3 years in advance. So I think initial cost of acquisition have gone up. So if we could actually find ways where we actually make the cost of acquisition in a total composite of total cost of ownership somewhat less heavy, may it be by some tax reduction, by a review of road taxes, by a review of the insurance scheme. I think we need to bundle the overall package, and we possibly need to get to the point where we actually make the product as such more affordable. Because the last couple of years we have seen a tendency where the vehicles became more expensive because of changes in the regulatory environment, but also because of the self-decided trend of the industry to put more features on the vehicles. And we gradually moved certain products out of the pocket size of the Indian entry customer.
So definitely the idea is to reduce, I will not say reduce GST, but make the cars more affordable, right? How important is the upcoming festive season going to be to get the sales back for Tata Motors to the pre-COVID levels? Because we don't really, while on one hand there is concern on what's happening in India because of high number of COVID cases, on the other hand, for Tata Motors, the other markets like China, Guenter, are also facing the heat due to COVID-19.
The challenge is twofold. I must admit, in the weeks ahead of us, the one is creating the demand and to really keep the momentum we have on the demand side as we speak. At the same point of time, we need to deal with lots of supply chain constraints. Despite the business continuity plan, we had certain disconnects which got imposed by containment, by lockdown, by sub-supplies from foreign countries.
Right.
So second-tier suppliers to our first-tier suppliers. So therefore, we need to align. We call it an SNOP, an integrated sales and operations plan. So we need to make sure that we actually link the two of them in order to leverage production capacity and meeting the demand to the best possible extent. The last 2 months, as much as we have seen an increase, it's built on the pent-up demand after post-lockdown.
Right.
We have seen lots of first-time buyers getting into the ownership model, taking advantage of very attractive financing schemes and vehicles entry level being available. The festive season is going to be a kind of proof to what extent the trend of the last 2 months is somewhat more sustainable.
Or not,
honestly speaking, as much as the festive season is important for the entire fiscal year 21, the second half of the year is going to be the real proof point, because then we will see if all the one-time effects, and it's a long list, will then start to become structural so that we can continue the journey till the end of the year. And then I'm much more positive as far as the next fiscal year is concerned, because as we expect post-COVID, the economy to recover, then we get the larger stimulus, as already mentioned earlier,
right,
which is going to drive growth of the economy and us as an important part of the economy, taking advantage from it. And then we will actually get back to a reasonable CAGR rate in order to recover the losses we have accrued over the last 24 months.
True. Guenter, allow me to get in Mr. Duggal also in on that. Mr. Duggal, the mining sector is a very important sector for, the engines of the economy to really move forward. You did talk about how initially there were a lot of concerns because, your mines are being operated in rural areas and there you could not operate in full capacity. But have things kind of become back to normal? You were talking about how 80 to 90% of the work was being done by the 20% workforce that was going to the mines. But what about now, and what is the road to recovery is going to look like? Do you believe the second half of the year is going to be even more critical to get the engines of the economy to rev up?
Definitely. You see, if you ask me, from my viewpoint, the demand is back to say about 70 to 80% of the normal demand today. But if we look at this is basically whether the demand is going to stay or not. In a complete cycle, somebody has to kick. So who has the greatest responsibility to click and kick? I think the government has the responsibility. The government should not worry at this point of time about inflation. They should be more worried about spending. So even if the inflation goes up, they should pump in more money into the economy. Into
where's the more money going to come in from?
No, whatever. Whatever. The government has to take a call, even if they have to borrow money, but somewhere some push has to come. Stimulus is one thing, but the whole cycle will become better when somebody will kick in and somebody will put in some stimulus in a way of pumping the money into the infrastructure, so that the whole cycle becomes better, because then the jobs will be created.
True.
The entire cycle will become much better than what it is today. As far as the government is concerned, of course, the government is trying to do a lot. They have been talking about the Outmanoeuvring Bharat, but some of the reforms also in the offing. You must have heard that they have announced the reforms in defense sector. They have also announced the reforms.
The mining sector has also been opened up for private players.
Yeah, so for coal sector has been opened up for the private players. Now they have opened up the commercial mining.
Right.
The Coal India will not be the only player producing the coal now. So there are a lot of reforms coming up. So I think the government has been very brave in bringing these reforms. Along with that, if they will pump in money into the infrastructure so that the whole cycle kicks in, that is the best thing to do. But there are other opportunities also. Let us suppose the China-India relation has got impacted, and a lot of technology, a lot of machinery has been imported from China. But if there is some restriction or there is some apprehension to import parts or the new technology or the new machinery from China, there is an opportunity within the domestic industry to build in MSMEs, build in the technology.
Allow me to come in on that. On one hand, because of Atmanirbhar Bharat push, yes, there is an opportunity that has been created for India Inc. But on the other hand, given the fact that the supply chains are disrupted, we are also dealing with a potential cost increase with respect to a lot of industries as well. So how does the balancing act really happen?
Then you have no choice. Like we have emerged from the pandemic and we have survived. Like the parts which are not being imported, after all, our operations have not stopped. So, but that is definitely an opportunity for the Indian industry to take lead. The government to support the MSMEs. Some R&D has also to come. Some industry has also to provide the help to them. So I think but the government also has to be brave in terms of the environment clearances, land reform, labor reform. There are n number of pain areas the industry is facing today. But I think the government is mindful about this, and with this mindfulness, some of the reforms what they have done, and they should also realize that what are the more reforms they have to do so that the entire cycle becomes eased out, and this becomes an opportunity where we can gain from where we are. But I tell you that the apart from the construction sector, the multiplier effect of the natural resource sector and the mining sector is the biggest. It is 1:15, 1:12, 1:16, depending on the sector where we are. So if we will be able to open up, these areas where the employment generation could be very large. And let me also tell you, the India contributes 1.4% of the GDP by way of mining. But if we actually benchmark with some of the other similar geology country, they contribute 8 to 10%. So, and the per capita consumption of all these metals in India is minuscule compared to the other countries. So when some of these things will be changed, and like the commercial mining, the mining sector will also be opened up, the contribution can go up. So it has the potential, ultimately, the contribution grows from 1.5% to even 5%. It has the potential to give 10 crore jobs to the people, so, which could be a game changer for the industry, for the economy, I would say.
But of course, the government has to bite the bullet on reforms. Let me get Mr. Piyush also in on that. And, this is going to be my last question. We're running out of time. We never, as we were talking about how technology has played a huge role during these times, but now is the time to reinvent, the time to reprioritize as well. And you were making that very important point that the fact that to reinvent your supply chains is going to take a little while. And now we have, this threat coming in from China as well. The government also putting a curb on Chinese investments, being a little more watchful, increasing their scrutiny as well. What do you think now needs to be done in a bid to ensure that the Indian industry is given the much needed push, domestic manufacturing also comes up to speed, because this is not going to happen all of a sudden. It's going to be a long-term process.
And I agree with you. And look, anything long-term requires long-term stability, right? So a number of things have been, everybody said. In the short term, the consumer requires some stability and hand-holding about the scenarios from the governments and the regulator. If this happens, what happens, so that the consumer's confident about spending, those who still have the wherewithal to spend. For industry, it does need some long-term policy, assurance to say, in the scenario that the Chinese supply chain is broken, and I want to invest to harness that, it will not get reactivated tomorrow morning, and therefore my investment is going to get half-baked. So there is long-term policy stability will be required. But the third point I would make is anything this period is teaching us is the fact that we need to be far more nimble about instability, which means that we'll have to sadly, it's maybe counterintuitive, but we need to invest to become nimble. We need to invest in order to become nimble. So it's a drain of capital in order to utilize capital better, right? So that is something that we'll have to do. And to your other point, you asked earlier, where will the government get the money? Government will have to trade off strategic priorities. Automobile. The reason why the government brought about BS6 norms is because we want to reduce long-term pollution. Therefore, the churn of the old stock is a strategic priority. Therefore, it's not a question of short-term fiscal stimulus only.
Absolutely.
It's a long-term strategic investment that you're making in healthcare. So you'll have to think about such strategic priorities. On the other hand, you've got more people in rural India today than there were ever before. They have got entrepreneurial skills because they were Uber drivers in Mumbai, or they were doing something, unleash, lending to MSME in rural sectors so that they can settle down right there, because there's a strategic priority to rebalance urban and rural population. So I do think they're thinking about strategic priorities for the government that will unleash some capital expenditure that they can make in these times.
Also, in fact, that's going to be critical to get back the animal spirits as well. I'm sure Sangita couldn't agree more. We saw her nodding while you were talking. But on that note, we're completely running out of time. Saugata, Sunil, Guenter, Sangita, Piyush, appreciate you guys taking out your time and speaking with us today at ETGBS.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.